When looking at a new player, you can almost always find them doing the same mistakes, and honestly, it's not even their fault, because OS does an incredibly poor job in telling you what to do. Which is why today I've decided to compile a list of the most common mistakes you have to watch out for when getting into OS. Because if you don't get rid of them as soon as you can, it'll basically be impossible to fix them later. But now, let's not waste any more time, like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. First up, it's something which I was also guilty of myself when starting out, and in this case, mashing refers to you just pressing buttons as fast as you can instead of properly timing your taps, which makes it basically impossible to get any kind of consistent results. Now, especially when it's their first rhythm game, it's quite common to see new players mashing on bursts or streams, but it's also possible to mash on sliders or even jumps. And while all of that's bad, I still want to go over each of them individually and talk about why it's a problem. Let's start with bursts. Besides jumps, they're probably the most common pattern you'll encounter. And while it's already bad enough to be inconsistent on one of the most popular patterns, but what makes it even worse is that bursts build the foundation you will need to play streams later. So if you already can't play bursts, you won't be able to play streams. And as for those, well, if you're a new player, I would really recommend that you avoid them for now, cause they're really hard to do right. But if you play them wrong, your accuracy is just going to be all over the place and you will finger lock, which in the worst case can cause quite a bit of hand pain. With sliders, I'm of course talking about the short ones, cause let's be real here, you won't see anyone mashing this. Now, the thing is, mashing here won't punish you for quite a while, cause slider mechanics are pretty broken, but you will definitely struggle later once you get to complex maps. And lastly, jumps. Just don't. Like sure, sometimes it can happen cause you panic, and that's fine. But jumps are almost always spaced at 1/2 beat apart, and if you find yourself mashing at the most basic rhythm, you've got a problem. But now, as for the next mistake, it's going to be accuracy. Because you see, even though the mapping might suggest otherwise, OS is still a rhythm game, which means 70% is not acceptable. I even made a video to help you do that, so check it out if you're interested. But now, let's talk about why having low AC is a problem to begin with. Basically, you aren't following the music. Now, if you've just gotten into rhythm gaming, that's completely fine, but you still shouldn't accept it. Cause like this, you're basically missing out on the biggest component of the game, so you'll probably lose interest really fast. Another common thing, which kinda ties in with the first two, is rushing improvement. And given how most people discover OS nowadays, it's kind of understandable why it happens. And even if it isn't, what made you find the game in the first place? Seeing a top player go God mode? Well, if you're here, you probably want to do that too. Honestly, we all wish we could, but let me show you something. All of them have spent thousands of hours with the game. And when you watch one of those highlights, what you see is the peak of their skill, but what you can't see is all of the time and dedication that went into getting to that level in the first place. Even I had to spend hundreds of hours to get to where I am today, and I'm nowhere near the top. So if you've just gotten into the game recently and you expect to get those kinds of results anytime soon, you'll just get frustrated cause you can't achieve them. You just gotta think of it like any other skill. You wouldn't expect to win a marathon before you learned how to walk. So for now, let's leave the high star maps on the shelf and instead focus on smaller steps to increasing your skill. Next up, it's a bit of a small one, and while it might not seriously impact your gameplay, it's still a bad mindset to have. And I'm of course talking about that feeling that you need to have good equipment to play the game. Now, I'm not talking about basic equipment so the game can at least run decently. What I'm talking about is how some people feel like they need the top of the line equipment to even get started. Whether that's having a tablet, a high frequency monitor, or even wanting a 480. None of those things will make you a better player. And honestly, they won't even make it easier for you to improve. Instead, what they do is that they slightly increase your potential. Say with your current setup, you can eventually reach 100%. They might increase that to 102 or something. But if you're sitting down at 20, it makes no difference either way. And lastly, it's something we're honestly all guilty of. And it makes sense. It feels good to see the number go up. It places you higher on the global leaderboard, and it's basically the only indicator for skill you really have. It's just that it actually does a pretty poor job at that. Cause just as any other system, it's actually pretty flawed. And no matter how many more balance changes we have, there will always be ways to optimize your PP gains. And why wouldn't you take the path of least resistance? There's just one problem with it. If you only do that, you'll have an incredibly narrow skill set. Cause farm maps are literally built to exploit the system. They're made to be comfortable and easy while also awarding a ton of PP. So they have simple rhythms and most of the map is taken up by easy patterns, and when you eventually get to the hard part, it's basically just flinging your cursor across the screen. And sure, I'm one to talk, given that my top plays are filled with the same garbage as well, but it's far from the only thing I'm playing. Once you're past the new player stage, farming or even playing for PP is completely fine, as long as it's not the only thing you're doing. And that's really what I want you to take away from this. And with that, we've covered all of the different mistakes I wanted to get into with this video. And if you've got any other ones which you feel I've missed, please definitely let me know down in the comments below. Other than that, I really hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and with that, see you next time.